So get this, the PlayStation 2 has been online for 23 years now. Over 80 plus games supported the online functionality, and yet to this day it still receives over 500 plus active user logins daily. It's also home to some of the most original classic online experiences that you simply can't find on any other PlayStation platform. This time last year I made a video covering a handful of dead PS2 Online games. Since it's been a hot minute, why don't we go explore a few more games? So in today's video I'll be spending time with one of the oldest PS2 Online communities, experiencing one of the most underappreciated racing games, to exploring a Call of Duty game that's been lost to obscurity. This is Exploring Dead PS2 Online Games 2. But before we dive into some obscure PS2 Online games, here's a quick word from today's video sponsor, Gamersupps. Now fellas, I've been binge drinking coffee for years now. It's gotten to a point where it doesn't give me any sort of benefit outside of satisfying a craving and being hella dehydrated. So earlier this year, when Gamersupps reached out and offered to partner with the channel, I had the chance to try out their product line, and I ended up really digging it. GG's is an energy and nootropic formula designed for gamers by gamers. It contains zero sugar and it's made up of essential vitamins. It's keto and vegan friendly, are fully transparent in their ingredients list, and best of all, it tastes great. If you don't want to geek out on caffeine, they also offer a ton of caffeine-free tubs too. I highly recommend the Guacamole Gamer Fart 9000 flavor. Also, if you ever want an excuse to bring your wafu to work without getting escorted out of the building by security, Gamersupps has it covered with its extensive line of wafu cups. You might end up being that quote-unquote guy in the office, but it's 100% worth it. Use coupon code MACH3 to save 10% on your order, or use my link in the description of this video. If you're still on the fence, they do offer samples of their products shipped to your door 100% free of charge, no strings attached. Gotta love that. Thank you Gamersupps for supporting the channel. Now back to the video. Alright, so get this, everyone and their grandma already knows why the PlayStation 2 is so amazing. Yet most people nowadays don't seem to talk about its online functionality. It's almost as if most players didn't even know it had an online option to begin with, which is a real shame. The PS2 had well over 50 plus games that supported online play. It was 100% free to use, and in my opinion, it offered more original, experimental games when compared to the PlayStation 5's online library. Man, you had the SOCOM series, Twisted Metal Black, the original Killzone, EverQuest Online Adventures, Resident Evil Outbreak, Battlefield Modern Combat 2, the list goes on. And the best part of the PS2's online is that there's no microtransactions, none of that season pass mumbo jumbo, just good old-fashioned games designed with the player in mind, not their wallet. Now, one of the biggest drawbacks to the PS2's online is how it doesn't use the PlayStation Network. Instead, Sony took more inspiration from how the PC handles online play versus something like the original Xbox Live for an example. This meant that you didn't have a unique gamer tag and would rely on third-party publishers to maintain and host their own game servers. Since that was about 20 years ago, most if not all PS2 official servers have been shut down, with the last official server going offline on April 4th, 2016. However, not all hope was completely lost. For the past 9 years, multiple server revival teams have taken it upon themselves and have successfully revived approximately 69 games so far. Nice, with more planned to be completed in the near future. One of the biggest advantages to a lot of these PS2 server revivals is how the vast majority of them now support crossplay with both physical hardware and the PC SX2 emulator. This means that it's now possible to play online with someone on an Xbox Series X, PC, and even the Steam Deck. So you really don't have any excuse nowadays not to try it out. Anyways, let's start our journey off strong by exploring a community that's been around since 2002 and continues to grow over 2 decades later. I'm talking about Tribes Aerial Assault. For those who have never played Tribes before, it's an arena first-person shooter that puts a stronger emphasis on mobility over everything else. Now, Tribes is primarily known for being played on PC. However, in late 2002, there was a console-exclusive Tribes game built from the ground up for the PS2, being considered as an undirect port of Tribes 2. Fun fact, this was the very first PlayStation game to call itself the quote-unquote Halo Killer. So, the story goes that back in late 2008, the game's publisher, Sierra Entertainment, Entertainment ran out of business, with the game's official servers being shut down in the process. Fast forward to 2025 and the game has not only been fully revived, but it's had numerous improvements, such as how it now utilizes AWS cloud servers, reducing lag to the bare minimum. What makes the Aerial Assault community stand out among every other game that we've covered thus far is just how involved both the fans and the developers are in keeping this game alive for over 2 decades. The backstory and lore behind this community is really cool. More on that later on in the video. So as per usual, I logged into Tribes on my PlayStation 2 and decided to explore this old chestnut out. So when you first log into Tribes, you're greeted with the option to create your very own warrior. You can choose to play as either a male, female, or my personal favorite, the Bioderm. There are a handful of different skins that you can choose from, and I like how the game allows you to choose your own voice preset. I would consider it as a bare bones character customization tool in comparison to what we have nowadays, but it works. Exploring the world of Tribes alone feels a lot like walking through a graveyard at night. It's just so spooky. You can tell at one point that this used to be a spot where people would spend their Friday nights, shooting the shit and living in the moment. An era where we valued our attention span, had more in common, and ultimately weren't afraid to talk to each other.
Are we too old?
Nowadays, the only thing keeping you company here is the instrumental rock music that plays in the background and these turrets. Tribes feels weird to play, so get this, in order to shoot your gun, you use the L2 trigger. Not so weird, right? Well, to aim down your sights, you use the R2 trigger. The X button switches between weapons, and to throw grenades, you click the triangle button. It's a bit of a nut buster if I'm honest. Halo Combat Evolved released 1 year prior, and for the most part nailed how a first-person shooter should control with 2 thumbsticks. If the developers had included the option to remap the controls, then this would have not been such a big deal. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch, it's just an odd design choice. Now, what makes Tribes, well, Tribes is the game's unique take on how you maneuver through the environment. The community calls this mechanic skiing. Instead of bunny hopping across a map like you could in Quake 3 Arena, in Tribes, you glide across it. So let's say you were to jump off a mountain. In any other game, you would instantly fall to your death. In Tribes, however, you can hit the slope like you're Shaun White and launch yourself straight up into the sky. In order to maintain momentum, you can tap the L1 button whenever you hit the ground, causing you to rebound instantly. Aerial Assault also gives you a jetpack that you can use to combo the skiing mechanic, making it much easier to get across the map. That's just a brief summary of the mechanic, as there's a lot more technicality to it. It's got its own rhyme and rhythm to it, which does take some time to get used to, but with some practice, it gets a lot easier to pull off over time. With that being said, for a game that released in 2002, it's surprisingly fluid and oddly satisfying to use. Moving on, the maps in Aerial Assault are huge. You could summarize the vast majority of the maps of either taking place inside a valley, on top of a mountain, inside a volcano, etc. I admire the developers' attempt at making them feel atmospheric. Yes, that does look like a sedative. Take this one mountain map for an example. I like how the developers use the fog here to give the mountain summit more depth. Then you got other maps where you can get killed by a random asteroid falling from the sky. It's pretty damn cool how much effort they put into making, the atmosphere of the world feel more alive and lived in, even if the level of detail isn't on par with something from like Halo Combat Evolved for an example. Speaking of Halo, one of the maps that I did play on remind me a lot of that Halo Macworld presentation from back in the day. The OGs in chat will know what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna lie though, running around and getting in fights with turrets is only fun for so long. This game could use a lot more people. That's much better. So what exactly is the objective of Tribes? Well, the game gives you 5 game modes to choose from. You got your run-of-the-mill modes that one would expect from a first-person shooter. Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, and Capture the Flag. You also got some quintessential Tribe game modes here, such as Hunters. This one plays a lot like Kill Confirmed from the Call of Duty series, but with a twist. Instead of picking up clan tags off the ground, in Hunters, you pick up flags, with the player having to drop them off into what the game calls the Nexus. Without a doubt in my mind, this is hands down the most sweatiest mode in Aerial Assault. Then you also have Capture and Hold. Think King of the Hill? No, not that King of the Hill.
Dang it, Bobby. I'm gonna kick your ass.
In Capture and Hold, each team has to capture and hold the objective for as long as possible, with whoever holding the objective for the longest amount of time winning the match. Personally, I preferred Capture the Flag over Capture and Hold since I found that to be a lot more fun to play, but different strokes for different folks. The game gives you 3 armor classes to choose from: light, medium, and heavy. The light armor class is like the scout class from Team Fortress 2. You can travel a lot faster than any other class, but has a downside of being quite weak. The medium class is like a jack of all trades, taking influence from both light and heavy, with the added benefit of being able to spawn turrets and remote inventory stations, kind of like the engineer class from Team Fortress 2. Meanwhile, the heavy class is quite slow but has the most amount of health. Just like the heavy class from Team Fortress, you get what I'm trying to say. Each team is also given their own home base that is fully explorable. I like to think of them more like a fortress. It's made up of trapdoors, turrets, and generators that you can disable. It gives the game another layer of strategy that can be used to your advantage if you know what you're doing.
Team Storm scores.
Vehicles also play a big part in aerial assault. I like how it allows you to select all of them right off the bat without having to unlock each one individually. Speaking of that, there's 4 to choose from. There's this cool land vehicle called Mongoose. No, not that Mongoose. The Dingo Fighter, which is the fastest ship in the game. The Pill Down Transport, which is like aerial assault equivalent to taking the bus. Then you have the Hammer Bomber, a ship that allows you to spam endless amount of bombs onto the enemy's base. You want to know something cool? If you fly a ship out of bounds, unlike every other game where it kills you instantly, in Tribes, it lets you fully explore the outskirts of the map. I believe it generates the same terrain over and over again until you return to the play area or jump out, but it's pretty damn cool if you ask me. Weapons also play a big role in Tribes, so there's about 10 guns that you can use in aerial assault. They're not going to blow your socks off, nor is it a game changer for that matter, but I like to think the developers cared more about quality over quantity. You got some cool arena shooter staples here, such as a rocket launcher, grenade launcher, chain gun, and this cool laser rifle. What I like about Tribes is how the guns have an effect on the player too. For an example, there's this one gun called the Spin Fuser that shoots out explosive discs. If you time it just right, you can also use it to rocket jump across the map. Also, certain weapons only work depending on what class you're playing as. So for another example, the light class can equip the rocket launcher. However, it's the only class that can use the laser rifle, which is just as powerful if you know what you're doing. In short, there's something for everyone here when it comes to guns. Nothing seems to be overpowered, and the developers did a great job at keeping everything balanced, as it should be. There really isn't anything else quite like Tribes. It's one of the only games that continues to piss you off to no degree. But for whatever reason, it draws you in. Maybe it's due to just how insane and chaotic matches would get. Or could it be due to the fact that aerial assault is just so refreshing to play nowadays? A game where people treat it more like a professional sport versus an electronic babysitter. It's one of those experiences that makes you appreciate the simpler things in life, and that's probably why I love it.
Wait a sec. Wait a sec.
Alright, it's time to talk about the community surrounding aerial assault. Now, there's a lot to unpack here as the history spans over 2 decades. Instead of just citing facts based on the stuff that I would find online, I decided to do something different for this segment and interview someone from the community who's been around since 2002, an OG who's experienced this game during its peak and still with the community 23 years later. This is Azriel. To provide some context, he was first introduced to the series, like many others, with Tribes 1 on PC. When the game was released on the PlayStation 2, he was curious to see what it was like to play, so he purchased a PlayStation 2 modem adapter with a copy of the game. What he had never expected from the simple purchase was just how involved he'd become within the community 2 decades later. According to Azriel, the community originated on GameFAQs.com, then PowWow.com, and then TribesAerialAssault.com, which eventually led to another website called GamersPlug.com. Go figure. Azriel was an active member of the forum during this time, being part of the Reckless Assault clan. He even went for the effort of digging up his old clan photo to me to show you guys. So cool. This game meant the world to Azriel. now. He didn't want to see it fade away into obscurity like many other multiplayer games from that era, so he embarked on a mission to preserve and keep the spirit of this ill-fated game alive. Azrael first started his journey by creating a website using the original Tribe's Aerial Assault web domain. The website is what I would consider as a game's unofficial library. He's gone as far as archiving old clan history, tournament brackets, recovering old artwork for the game, making walkthroughs and guides on how to play, etc. This site is also filled with some of the most 2000s shit that you could ever think of. Man, would I do live in that era again. So you might be asking yourself, Mock, how did this game come back online? You see, back in 2004, 4 years before the official shutdown, one of the developers by the name Ricochet released a patch that allowed the game to run off dedicated servers. This was massive for the competitive scene, as before this, the game ran off peer-to-peer, which isn't really ideal when it comes to playing the game professionally. Ricochet was one of the developers who would continually support the community after launch, creating patches and updates for the game during his free time. He is also an industry veteran who has worked on titles such as Medal of Honor Rising Sun and Area 51, some of the most underappreciated first-person shooters in the 6th generation, at least in my opinion. When Sierra Entertainment pulled the plug in the game in 2008, the dedicated servers went down with it. Turns out that about a week or so later, a team by the name PS2 Online was able to revive the game, but this came with a caveat: it was only peer-to-peer. As we already know, peer-to-peer really sucks when it comes to playing anything competitively. Fun fact, Azrael told me how he managed to find the guy responsible for the revival, who goes by the name Ben, by digging through an online phone book. He was curious as to why the dedicated servers were never brought back online, so he picked up the phone and called the dude himself. If that doesn't scream passion, I really don't know what else would. Anyways, the community was in a weird spot for 14 years. Sure, they could play the game now, but it wasn't the same. That was until 2022 when a breakthrough happened. A member of the community by the name Relic was successfully able to bring back the dedicated servers using Amazon Web Services. With the help from 1UP from the PlayStation Rewired team and Beer Baron, they managed to get it up and running for a short period of time. I guess something happened in the background, which led to Azrael hosting the game's servers off his laptop inside his utility room for about a year. Talk about dedication. Nowadays, this game runs smooth as butter and fully supports crossplay with PlayStation 2 consoles and the PC SX2 emulator, with the future looking brighter than ever. I asked Azrael what viewers watching this video can do to help. He said to simply share the word and join the community if you want to give it a try. He also has a YouTube channel that shares regular updates on the game, special events, etc. If you're interested, link will be in the description down below. Thank you once again, Azrael, for making this segment of the video possible. It's greatly appreciated. My time with Tribe's Aerial Assault was time well spent, if you haven't guessed already. If I had to summarize my experience in a paragraph, I would say it's like listening to Operation Doomsday for the very first time. Sure, it's aged in some areas, and it can be off-putting considering how unorthodox it is compared to other first-person shooters, but its delivery is just so raw. It's unlike anything you can play today and serves as a perfect example as to why the PS2's Online was so special. I strongly recommend that you check this one out if you get the chance. Now, for something completely different, let's talk about Tony Hawk Underground. For those unaware, the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series was huge during the 2000s. Before Activision was known for milking Call of Duty every single year, the Tony Hawk franchise used to be their golden goose. That was until they started to run out of ideas and basically screwed themselves over with add-ons that no one asked for. That being said, Tony Hawk Underground at the time was seen as a breath of fresh air. It had a stronger emphasis on the game's story and introduced some nifty mechanics, such as being able to get off your board and giving you the ability to drive a car. Underground is a type of game where you could spend hours playing it without getting bored. It's as if the game puts you under a spell the second you pick up the controller. It's best described as a game that you would play after a long days of work. You know, something to play where you can kick back your feet, sip on a beer, listen to YouTube in the background, and just chill out. So picture this, it's a Wednesday afternoon and I'm dicking around working on the video that hopefully you're watching by now. I hop onto Underground not expecting to find a single soul. Well, wouldn't you know it, I just so happen to come across another player chilling inside an empty server. So here I am sitting in this lobby with a dude by the name Mill. I said what's up, He then replies asking if I have Kick Messenger. You remember that app? I'll be honest, I haven't used that since like 2012, I want to say. I decided to be a smartass and told him I use MSN Messenger instead. Anyways, it turns out that Mill over here has been playing since the 2000s and has been trying to find other people to play with for quite a while now. I told him about the Thug 2 event coming up on the PlayStation 2 Online Discord channel. By the way, if you're trying to find others to play with, I highly recommend joining that channel, link in the description. Then we just kind of parted ways and skated around Tampa. This is why I love this game. Everyone is so relaxed and content with skating around for hours on end. It's like eating dinner with an introvert. Not a single word is spoken since your company does all the talking for you, if that makes any sense. Playing Thug is the equivalent of reconnecting with an old best friend. Sometimes going back to old games from this era, you're reminded of just how poorly things have aged. I'm looking at you, Killzone 1. However, Thug somehow feels better to play in 2025 than it did in 2003. I don't know about you guys, but I've always found that Underground had some of the best skating mechanics in the entire series. I find that it strikes the perfect balance of being approachable for anyone new to Tony Hawk, while requiring hours of trial and error to fully understand its depths of its gameplay. Simply put, it's easy to pick up and play, but hard to master. It's a perfect example as to why gameplay will always triumph graphics any day of the week. So what can you do online in Tony Hawk Underground? Well, as a matter of fact, there's a ton of things that you can play. In terms of game modes, if you want something competitive, you got classics like Trick Attack, where the main objective is to simply land as many tricks as possible, with whoever earning the most amount of points winning the game. Easy peasy. Then you got Graffiti, where you have to tag individual parts of the environment. In order to take over a spot, you have to outdo the other player's combo. Graffiti is a ton of fun to play with some buddies, and can get incredibly sweaty at times. Another classic mode in Thug is King of the Hill. So in King of the Hill, players fight against each other in capturing a crown and holding it for as long as possible. This is hands down one of my favorite modes, since it's always like a game of cat and mouse. It never manages to get boring. There's also a lot of fun party modes in Underground as well. One of them that I liked was called Slap, where all you do is bitch slap as many players as possible within a time limit. And how can I not forget Firefight? Firefight is like Tony Hawk's version of Battle Royale. Instead of using guns, you shoot fireballs from your skateboard, with whoever manages to be last man standing winning the game. If I could nitpick here, I wish this mode would have included some sort of power-ups. Just imagine if you could pick up one that would let you freeze the other player, or even something as simple as shooting 3 balls at once. It would have helped give the mode more longevity, as it's kind of bare bones without it, if I'm honest. If I had something else to complain about, you have to unlock all the levels in single player in order to play them in online. What this means is that you have to rely on the host to have every level unlocked, considering that it takes around 7 hours to complete the game and get access to all the maps. It's kind of a pain in the dick. To make matters worse, there isn't a cheat code to my knowledge that unlocks everything. Now I'm sure there is a GameShark code out there that does fix this problem, but it's still really annoying. You can only play on New Jersey for so long. Now Thug used to allow you to upload and download user created levels, just like you could in something like Far Cry 2 for an example. However, I don't believe the service actually works anymore. I tried this feature and it kept giving me a connection error message. I'm not too sure if it still works or not, but it's still pretty damn cool. To think that Neversoft had envisioned this way back in 2003 on the PlayStation 2 is pretty forward thinking in my opinion. Tony Hawk Underground also has this quirky face scan tool. This lets you scan a photo of yourself to be used as a custom skater in game. So get this, in order to use this feature, you first had to take a photo of yourself, then email it to Neversoft, and then from there you can download it directly in-game from your PlayStation 2. Being curious, I decided to send over this goofy ass photo to the Neversoft email in the odd chance that it still would work. It turns out that I was over a decade late to the party. God damn it. Fun fact, Rainbow Six Vegas also had a similar feature, but instead of having to send an email, you could take photos using the Xbox Live Vision camera. The end result would always look really scuffed, but it's still pretty damn impressive nowadays. Now, I used to play this game religiously as a kid on the GameCube, and it still holds a special place in my heart. It's almost like comfort food to me. It was a game that I would go to whenever I was having a shitty day at school or dealing with the death of a loved one. No matter what, Underground always seemed to be there for me as a kid. This was also my first introduction to underground hip-hop. I don't think I would have known about the likes of Madlib, MF Doom, Nas, J-Live, Ari the Rugged Men, Deltron 3030, and Cannibal Ox if it wasn't for this game. Shout out to Neversoft for doing their homework, and big ups to the audio team for having such a great taste in hip-hop. In short, I'm really glad I had the chance to revisit Underground again. This is personally my favorite game to play online on the PlayStation 2, without a doubt. Next up, we have Modellista US Tuned. Modellista is unlike any other racing game that you've probably played before. I describe it as if you threw both Gran Turismo and Need for Speed Underground into a blender and sprinkled some of that good old cel-shaded goodness into the mix. Now, the US version of this game is still offline, but as of last year, the Japanese version of Modellista US Tuned was successfully brought back online. The person behind this revival is fellow YouTuber Grender's Lab. He's also working on bringing back the original Modellista as of the recording of this video. Best of luck, and thank you once again for making all this possible to begin with. Anyways, I've never had the chance to play this game before, so I reached out to my buddy Canal78 and we spent an entire Thursday afternoon playing this forgotten gem. Let's get the basic stuff out of the way first. Modellista offers two multiplayer modes, races and club meetings. Races is what you come to expect from your average racing game. You got some iconic tracks here, such as the Suzuka Circuit and the US Speedway. If that's more of a snooze fest to you, you can channel your inner Takumi and take on either the downhill or uphill toge tracks. With over 30 circuits to choose from, there's something for everyone here. Moving on, let's talk about cars. Modellista is filled to the brim with fun, unique vehicles to drive. Since this is the US Tune Edition, it also includes both Japanese, Korean, and American vehicles. If you love JDM, then you got your basic bitch R34 Skyline and Mark IV Toyota Supra. There's also a bunch of Honda Type Rs, Subaru WRX STIs, and of course Mitsubishi Lancer Evolutions. If you fancy more of a pocket rocket, then there's a ton of K cars to choose from, such as the Daihatsu Move and a Suzuki Alto Works. If you're more of a no replacement for displacement goddammit type of fella, all the three big manufacturers are here too. You got Corvettes, Mustangs, Camaros, and even a Dodge Viper. I would have loved to see more obscure American cars here if I could nitpick. I feel like a 1987 Mercury Capri would have fit the whole cel-shaded style of this game, or even a mid-80s Dodge Nami. How could I not talk about Modellista without mentioning just how damn good this game looks? The cel-shaded art style is the video game equivalent of Black Magic. No matter what resolution you play this at, either 4K or 144p, it will always somehow manage to look good. I love the small attention to detail here too, like the animated smoke that pops off your tires whenever you drift around a corner, to the anime running line effect that appears whenever you hit top speed. The art design has aged incredibly well and gives the game a ton of charm. My buddy Kanali mentioned it reminded him of Grid 2 if it was in an anime, and I could definitely see that. So with all that out of the way, what is Modellista like to play? Alright, hear me out. I want you to close your eyes and picture in your mind an Oreo cookie, preferably the maple cream flavor. The top layer of the cookie is Gran Turismo 4, the real driving simulator, as the cool kids call it, while the bottom layer is Need for Speed, taking on more of an arcade-style racing experience. Stuffed right in the middle of the cookie is Modellista, taking influence from both games. The way cars handle in this game is reminiscent of the Gran Turismo series. Every vehicle has its own distinct handling characteristics that separates them from each other. Front-wheel drive cars are easier to control, but have the caveat of being able to snap oversteer at a moment's notice. Rear-wheel drive cars are a lot harder to control, but are more responsive around a bend. Meanwhile, all-wheel drive cars are basically the perfect balance between both drivetrains, being more of a jack of all trades, master of none type of thing. On the other hand, the game feels very arcadey. It's honestly hard to describe without putting the controller in your hands. I found this post on Reddit that compares both versions of the game side by side. You can clearly tell that the original was a lot more arcadey and approachable, while US Tune is much harder to pick up and play. I personally found that the car handling in US Tune to be overbearing at times. It's as if the game doesn't know if it wants to be an arcade racer or a simulator. I respect the fact that Capcom tried something different, and I can definitely see its appeal, but this style just wasn't for me. I've heard others describe this game as a simcade, and I think that's a perfect way to describe US Tuned. Here's something cool that you can do in Modellista. You can use what the game calls club meetings. It's essentially a glorified car meet where everyone loiters inside an empty Japanese parking lot. If you live in Canada, you can see the exact same thing inside a Tim Hortons parking lot on a Friday night, minus the amount of littering in D-Series Civics trying to do a burnout. Back on topic, me and the boys just chilled and relaxed after spending a few hours of racing. You wanna know something weird? Almost every game on the PlayStation 2 handles the in-game keyboard layout differently. It's as if every studio was determined to outdo each other and making them as shitty as possible. In Auto, you scroll through this line and flip through each characters individually. While in Killzone 1, it uses this weird square block system, with the player having to type each character based on the X, circle, triangle, and square layout. Just so odd, man. Kinda makes you wonder why they just didn't opt for a QWERTY keyboard layout. I guess A1 for creativity, I don't know. Anyhow, one cool thing that you can do inside the club meeting is change the camera angle's perspective to this top-down view. It kinda reminded me of playing Parking Panic on coolmathgames.com as a kid. Shout out to anyone in chat who remembers that one and miniclip.com. Simpler times, man. Now, the community for Auto Modellista US Tune is tiny compared to almost every other PS2 online game. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that not many people know that's been brought back online. Next month, I plan on making an updated guide showcasing how to connect to this and every other game in this video, so stay tuned for that. In short, I'm glad I had the chance to play Auto Modellista. It's a fun, inventive racing game that any fan of this genre would enjoy. I'll leave a link to their Discord channel down below if you want to give this game a try for yourself. The next game on the list is what I would consider as one of the most criminally underrated first-person shooters on the PlayStation 2, that of course being Cold Winter. Released in 2005, Cold Winter was developed by Swordfish Studios, best known for Rugby Challenge 2006 and 50 Cent Blood on the Sand.
That bitch has got my scope!
Now this is a game that doesn't get much attention nowadays. It was a shooter that didn't necessarily push the envelope, but experimented with some cool ideas. It had an impressive physics engine that let you interact with the environment, the ability to push down tables and use them as a makeshift cover, and most notably its over-the-top gore system. Cold Winter also offered an underrated online mode. Like is the case with a lot of PlayStation 2 games, it's practically dead nowadays, or so I thought. Alright, so my journey with Cold Winter took place over a span of 2 weeks. The vast majority of my time spent here was sitting inside an empty lobby, running around the map, shooting at walls, while minding my own business. I want to say that within the 2-week time period, I came across at least 3 random people, but the rest of the times were spent playing with good old B-dubs in the PS2 Online Discord community, giving your boy the opportunity to experience everything that this multiplayer mode has to offer. The best way I can describe Cold Winter to someone who's never played it before is that it feels like one of those mid-2000s first-person shooters that you would play on PC. The OGs in chat might remember that old PC mod from back in the day called Urban Terror. Playing Cold Winter, for whatever reason, kinda reminded me of that game. Maybe it's the game's art style or how they share similar weapons, I don't know. Regardless, that's a good thing since that mod kicked ass. Cold Winter is like one of those games that you would rent on a weekend at your local Blockbuster. A time when people thought that using inverted aim by default was a good idea. Still never understood that. So you might be asking yourself, Mock, what does Cold Winter do differently than other shooters on the PlayStation 2? Well, let's start with arguably the best feature in Cold Winter, its dismemberment system.
You've taken the lead.
The dismemberment system in Cold Winter is really well done. If you've ever played a Soldier of Fortune game from the 2000s, Cold Winter takes heavy influence from that series. What I like about this feature is how depending on the gun that you're using, the amount of damage to the body will differ. So for an example, using a pistol, you won't inflict much damage outside of making a bloody mess. While using an AK-47, you basically rip anyone a new asshole with it. I appreciate the fact that it isn't as over the top in comparison to something like Soldier of Fortune, but it's still enough to make a statement. It finds a balance between the two, and the devs should be applauded for making it work seamlessly on the PlayStation 2. Man, the guns in Cold Winter are great. You got the old-fashioned M4A1 that is ideal for mid to short range gunfights. The AK-47 that's perfect for picking off fellas from a distance. There's a handful of bolt action and semi-automatic rifles to choose from. You got this cool gun called the Hammer, which is like this automatic shotgun that can rip people apart. And of course, how can I not forget the flamethrower? For whatever reason, the developers made this gun obnoxiously loud. Anyways, there's a good amount of variety to the weapons, all of them are fun to use, and yeah, what else can I say? Good stuff. If I had to find a bone to pick with this game, I'd say that the explosive weapons are way overpowered. I had encounters where I tried to duke it out with someone using just an SMG, but if they happen to have like an RPG or grenade launcher, well, tough shit. Since a lot of the level design has a player running through linear corridors, it makes it damn near impossible to avoid these things. On top of this shit sundae, there's no way to disable explosives outside of using a different weapon preset, which sucks ass since most of the presets have at least one explosive weapon in them. If the developers made them less powerful and easier to counter, then I don't think it would have been such a big deal, but hindsight's 2020 I suppose. I like how the game lets you pick up a bunch of random shit. For an example, you can pick up axle grease and an alarm clock. The alarm clock is just a grenade with a timer attached to it. While the axle grease, I have no sweet clue. I tried googling it, but it kept giving me advice on how to properly store a bike in the winter. So who really knows? For a game that released in 2005, it's held up incredibly well. I mean, just look at it. This might be one of the most impressive looking games on the PlayStation 2. I like how the developer went for the effort, including the small details, such as how walls will fill up with smoke after shooting them, and how dead bodies will attract flies over time. Just goes to show how much love and passion went into making this game. Another cool mechanic that Cold Winter has is how you can bleed out. So let's say I get into a gunfight and take like 5 shots. Over time, your vision and health will deplete from your wounds, and eventually your guy will just drop dead. I thought this is a pretty neat feature. Kind of remind me of playing something like Escape from Tarkov for an example. Cold Winter also has some interesting twists on popular first-person shooter game modes. Take Domination for an example. In traditional Dom, you usually have 3 points across a map where 2 teams fight against each other trying to capture said points. While in Cold Winter, it follows a similar structure but infuses free-for-all into the mix. It basically amounts to everyone fighting for themselves and needing to capture 5 points spread across the map. Instead of standing in one spot for 10 seconds, you need to physically hold the X button on the laptop in order to capture the objective. This has a caveat of making you vulnerable to anyone else around you, since there's no way to defend yourself. I gotta say, this is a fun take on the mode, and I wish more first-person shooters would adapt free-for-all into Domination. Then you got this goofy-ass mode called Head Match. This is Cold Winter's take on Oddball from the Halo series. Spread across the map is a severed head where the player needs to grab it and hold it for as long as possible, with whoever earns the most amount of points holding the head winning the game. It's a ton of fun with 5 players, and hands down one of the best modes to play in Cold Winter, at least in my opinion. Then there is Flag Tag. Flag Tag is a lot like Head Match, where the objective is to capture a flag and hold it for as long as possible. The biggest difference between the two is how in Flag Tag, once you pick up the flag, you're stuck with it. You can't physically drop it or defend yourself either, making it feel more like a game of hide and seek. It's a cool concept, don't get me wrong, but I really don't see why someone would choose this over Head Match, to be honest. If the developers would have allowed you to melee with the flag or turn the mode into something similar to, let's say, Capture the Flag but with a twist, that would have helped it make it stand out.
Drop the flag.
One questionable design choice in the game is how it constantly reveals the other team's location. Some of the most enjoyable gunfights are the ones where you peek around a corner just to get caught with your pants down. When you already know where the opponent is at all times, it takes away that surprise factor. It ends up feeling more like an arcade game than a true PvP shooter. If I had knocked this game down a notch, the inability to flip tables over in multiplayer feels like a missed opportunity. It would have been cool to use this feature as a last resort from escaping a gunfight, or being able to block a doorway by using a dresser. Anyways, for what it's worth, Cold Winter is one of those games that remind you of a simpler time, a bygone era that was ignorant to the fact that 20 years from now, everything would look a lot worse. I know everyone and their dog loved the 7th generation, but for me at least, the 6th gen will always be my favorite thanks to games like this. This was a time period when publishers weren't afraid to take risks and didn't rely on day 1 patches to fix their shit. If you want my unsolicited opinion, I'd recommend giving Cold Winter a try if you get the chance. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever talked to someone about what is the most underrated Call of Duty game? Some might say that Call of Duty Advanced Warfare doesn't get enough respect nowadays, while other people will go as far as say that Call of Duty Ghosts was one of the best games in the series. However, no one seems to mention Call of Duty 2 Big Red One, as if the game never existed in the first place. Big Red One was the first Call of Duty game created by Treyarch and released exclusively on 6th generation consoles. It offered 10 multiplayer maps, supported support up to 16 players and was one of the first Call of Duty games to introduce tanks into multiplayer. Originally, I wanted to cover this game this time last year, but I simply didn't get the chance. So I reached out to my buddy B-Dubs and asked if he wanted to play a few rounds for shits and giggles. To my surprise, he was down, and the rest is history. Let me tell you all about it. Alright, so Big Red One takes inspiration from the original Call of Duty while throwing its own spin on the formula. This game was released before the advent of Create a Class, kill streaks, and perks, and before the era of disrespecting the game's canon just to sell you stupid shit.
Look at that ass, yo.
Big Red One borrows some features from Call of Duty Classic, such as your health no longer regenerating, and how the scoreboard is practically identical to the original game. If you compare them side by side, you can see some similarities in terms of gameplay. Call of Duty Classic's hit detection and time to kill, in my opinion, is a lot better. Whereas I felt in Big Red One, it was almost like a dice roll half the time. It's not nearly as refined, and at times, it can feel quite dated. That's not to say that Big Red One doesn't have a few aces up its sleeve. I'll start with the level progression system first. Unlike traditional Call of Duty, which favors the overall amount of time spent playing the game, Big Red One instead values how much you contribute to your team. Whenever you start a match, your rank is reset to private. In order to progress through the ranks, you need to stack up kills or capture objectives. Each time that you level up, you unlock different abilities. You can call in motor strikes using a pair of binoculars, throw C4 at people, drop the odd health pack, and my personal favorite, being able to dual wield two pistols together. If you've ever played Call of Duty 3 before, then you might remember just how that game has a similar level progression system. If I had to choose between the two, I would say that Big Red One does it a lot better. Half the time in Call of Duty 3, leveling up doesn't give you much of a benefit outside of a few extra grenades and some bragging rights. Whereas in Big Red One, there's more of an incentive to play better. To quote Electronic Arts, the intent is to provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Jesus Christ. One cool feature that Big Red One lets you do that you can't do in Call of Duty 3 is the ability to lean in and out of cover. If you've ever played the original Fear, the cover system works almost identical to how it functions in that game. I personally forgot it existed half the time that I was playing Big Red One, but it's a nifty feature nonetheless. I just wanted to take a moment to say how much I appreciate that Big Red One features a lot of weapons that you don't normally see in World War II shooters. The OGs in chat will remember just how flooded World War II shooters were in the 2000s. Almost every single damn World War II shooter back then would either give you an M1 Grand, an MP40, or a Kar 98. You name it, it was rinse and repeat, same shit, different day. While in Big Red One, it gives you a ton of cool French and Italian guns. You got the MAS-36 rifle, the Beretta M1938A, the Beretta M1930, and the MAS-38 submachine gun. Kudos to Treyarch for doing their homework and giving us something different. Side note, I just love how punchy and raw the guns sound in this game too. Call of Duty Vanguard's guns sound like a pea shooter in comparison to it. Here's a fun fact about Big Red One. The game was developed in 9 months, with Treyarch having to crunch 6 days a week working 12-hour shifts. Here's another fun development fact. After the game was released, the team was given 2 weeks off. Then they were brought back into the studio and told that they had to endure yet again another 9-month development crunch for Call of Duty 3. This might explain as to why both games share so many assets with each other. I got this information from a YouTube thread of an alleged former developer who worked on both projects. Now, I know anyone can pretend to be anything on the internet, but to this guy's defense, he's been replying to people for over 5 years now. He also shares inside knowledge that was not publicly known, such as why Call of Duty 3 was never released on PC. If you have any burning questions about Big Red One or Call of Duty 3, I'll leave a link to the thread in the description down below. Back on topic, my time with Big Red One was short but sweet. It's a great Call of Duty game that dared to be different, took an approach that nowadays executives would deem as quote-unquote too risky, and delivers an experience that, simply put, is fun to play. I hope this video inspires you to check out this game if you ever get the chance. I highly recommend it. Before we end off this video, I'd like to give the following YouTube members and Discord users a shout out for their continued support. The following YouTube members are Killa Ninja KY74, Christy TM, Scion Top Hat, Joe Hogan, Respect Privacy, Bob Babom, Rick for the Win, OG Newbie, X Hazo, Hilarious Harvey, Timbo TK, Dawn the Second, shoutout Sabrina Carpenter, Shinua X Haverson, Pixelated Nick, Twin 10 Brother, Time Tunnel 4956, TJ's Techniche, Za, Baba Alahara, Canadian Jelly, Another Foxboy, Jcash_1, Fruzilla, and Hurdy, as well as the following Discord members: B-Dubs, Kanali78, Azriel, Amaturazuru_FTB, and the Tribe's Aerial Salt Discord community. Thank you guys so much, it is greatly appreciated. And that was exploring dead PS2 online games. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm currently working on a PS1 bootleg video. This one has a ton of different games, movies, emulators, and a bunch of random shit. I even managed to get my hands on 2 physical bootlegs. Pretty cool. Hoping to have that one out very soon. Anyways, if you enjoy the style of content, please consider leaving a like or even a subscription. It's greatly appreciated. But until next time, fellas, peace.